Hello there, YouTube, and hello there, art students. Good to talk to you. We're getting ready to do what I'm calling the second part of my critique writing lesson. And if you recall, what we did yesterday is we talked about how to go about writing a critique, and we're using the Feldman method. We kind of altered it a bit just for our needs so that it can be graded. It can be turned into a number grade. We said it's going to be 5 paragraphs of 5 sentences. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this process with you, and I'm going to sample critique an image. And so I decided to do one of my very favorite paintings all time. So let me jump right ahead. Bam, 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 to this one. This painting is called The Raft of the Medusa. So you're going to be taking some notes along with. Go ahead and get your notebook set up. Put your information on the right side, thinking on the left side, Cornell Notes fashion. And here we go. So the painting that we're doing is a painting by an artist named Theodore Géricault. I've included this painting. I started off here, this picture that I just pulled off the internet. Thank you, unnamed source. And I wanted to start off here because I wanted you to get an idea of what this painting looks like in terms of scale. So it's this large painting right there. And in fact, it is a humongous painting. It's 24 feet wide by 16 feet tall. It's a big painting. It hangs in the Louvre in Paris and is part of the permanent collection there. So I have altered the color a bit. So if you look, it's a bit drabber than what I've got here for you, because I did want you to be able to see it well in this video. But you know, if you want to, just go ahead and go to Paris and look at it for yourself. So the painting is oil on canvas and was painted by the then 27-year-old Theodore Géricault. I included, I'm even looking at some notes for this. This where it gets like scholarly, like what we're doing now. This gets scholarly, and you know, we're just assuming that Mr. Feldman is going to see his name on the YouTube machine, and he's going to pop in here to look at this video, and then he's going to say, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So I even have to get some notes here. I'm a little nervous. My art cred is on the line. So what I just did is I gave you the intro to the painting. So if you recall, I asked you to write 5 sentences as an introduction to the painting. A 24-foot wide by 16-foot tall, oil on canvas painting in the Louvre, done by Theodore Géricault, entitled Raft of the Medusa. So that's how that introduction works. The next step in the critique process is to describe the work. And what you do when you describe the work is you look at it and you tell what you see. So first of all, the painting is huge and it's relatively dark. The sky is sort of stormy looking. Looks like we have kind of a sunset thing, and then surrounding this image on all sides is sort of these swells of gray-green water that surround the figures. Speaking of the figures, in this image, you've got a group of about 20 figures that are on a raft. And the raft is sort of makeshift and sloppy. It's not like a solid boat. It's a hastily assembled raft. And you have a group of figures on the right side that are sort of pushing upwards. And then you've got sort of these figures on the left side, which are kind of morose or unconscious or dead. The painting, the raft is tipped. So it's riding up on a wave, which allows the corner of the raft. Should I use my little, what's that thing called? My little pointer? Whoop, whoop. The corner of the raft dips down low into the painting and touches the front of the painting so that you can almost step right onto it and become part of the painting itself. The figures in the back area, those figures would be about life size. You know, those figures are going to be 6 feet tall in the painting. Now the ones down here get a little larger. They're going to be, because of foreshortening and the way they're closer to you in the panel, those figures are going to be 10, 12, well, 8 feet tall, 10 feet tall. It's overall has sort of a murkiness to it. There are figures here in the front that are like, right here in the lower right, there's a figure that's sort of draped backwards off into the sea. You've got kind of an old man here that clutches this dead, we think, dead body. There are other figures that are sort of laying on the deck of the raft. So at this point, we're just describing it. I am not trying to guess or make any judgments about this work. I don't want to try to impose any sort of meaning to it at this point. I just want to describe it. I want to go through what I see. No judgments at this point. The third paragraph is to analyze. Analyze is the one that's a little harder to do. It's not hard to do. It just requires a little bit of specialty vocabulary, a little specialty knowledge. So the main bit of the composition is you've got sort of two halves. You got this sort of half over here, kind of a triangle or pyramid shape. And then over here, you've got this other triangle pyramid shape. And this one is sort of the lively, energetic shape, and this one over here is sort of this very lethargic and lifeless pyramid. My dog decided that this was the exact moment that she needed to start playing. I can hear her running around back there. There is a high degree of contrast set up in the painting using both value and color. So there is this part of the painting is very dark. This, the side of this figure is very brightly lit by, almost like a spotlight quality. So you have these high contrasts of value, and you also have some color contrast as well. Now, down here, most of the colors seem to be pretty uniform, but then you got this really bold contrast of brilliant color against the sky back there. This figure up here is kind of a dark, so there's a few dark silhouettes in here, but this dark silhouette against this bright sky really brings your eye. Everything is kind of pushes, like all these figures here lead your eye, create a movement and a push this direction towards this side of the painting. This long curve, well, then you got this pyramid shape of these lines that are happening here, and you get this big curved line that happens here, and this curve of the sail balances this curve of the wave, or mirrors this curve of the wave. And so even though all of the energy of the human beings push this way, the energy of nature and the sea and the wind pushes this way. So yeah, so what we're doing now is we're talking about movement and contrast and balance and variety and harmony and the elements of art. That's what happens in the third paragraph to analyze the work. So the third paragraph is the interpretation. That is when you look at this and you think, what is going on here? What's happening? What do I think the story is? And, obviously there's a story. It's called the Raft of the Medusa. That doesn't help us too much. It is a raft. We can see that. We might guess that the Medusa is a mythical monster. Does this have anything to do with a monster, sea monsters? Maybe. So what you're doing is you're trying to guess what's happening. What's the mood of this piece? Obviously, if we look right here, these three figures that are just desperate, and then this figure here and this figure here, which are just exhausted, and then this figure here, he doesn't even care what's going on behind him. He is so distraught at this sort of lifeless corpse he clings to that he's just given up. So what we're doing now is we are making guesses based on our observation about what the story is. We can see that this person is waving pieces of fabric, and there's other pieces of fabric that sort of litter around the deck. This kind of, to me, feels a little flag-like. So does it have anything to do with a flag, or is that just like, is that his shirt that he's waving there? We get this sort of wall of nature and this stormy seas and these, ominous clouds that kind of threaten us with a feeling of kind of oppression and of man's helplessness against the powers of nature. And for you, it is probably impossible to see, but if you look right here where I'm pointing, and that way off in the horizon, there's a tiny speck of a ship. And that ship, these figures we are guessing, are desperate to get the attention of that ship off in the distance. And we think, hoping for a rescue. So, that's our interpretation, or an interpretation of what's going on here. The last paragraph is what you need to do. Is all you need to do is you judge it. Do you like this painting, or do you not like this painting? You are free to not like this painting if you wish. It's not. I don't base any sort of evaluation of you as an art student on what you think of the art. Feel free to dislike it. That's fine. However, I told you that this was one of my very favorite paintings. So why is it one of my very favorite paintings? Well, this is where we get a little different than what we did on our last video, the critique video. This is where you get into study and you get into knowledge and history, and when you start to really understand what an artist is trying to do. And that's when it starts to get very interesting. So in the last video, I showed you the painting, Pablo Picasso's Guernica. There is a fascinating history that goes along with that painting, Guernica. I showed you the painting, The 3rd of May by Goya. There's a fascinating history that goes along with that. In addition, the people themselves, the artists that paint these images, are usually very interesting people that have led very interesting lives. So in many ways, the artist is the art. So the work that you see on canvas or sculpture or dance or music or whatever art form you're looking at, you're having a conversation with the artist who created it. So in order to fully understand this image, you have to do a little research. You have to do a little formal education to understand the painting. So here's what we're going to do. And this is where I'm going to try to be brief, but I cannot promise you, because I get very excited about this painting and the biographies of the artists and the stories, and it's just fascinating stuff. So let me tell you the story of this. This raft it's called the Raft of the Medusa, and the Medusa was a ship, a real ship, a French ship. This French ship had about 400 people on it, and it ran into a sandbar off the coast of Africa. This really happened. This is all true. So the ship is stranded and they can't get the ship off the sandbar. So what they decide to do is they're going to cobble together a raft from the materials of the ship. And that raft would be for cargo. It wouldn't be for people. But after a time, they think, okay, we're going to have to do something here. We can't stay here on this sandbar forever. So they load as many people as they can into the few lifeboats, but that's not enough. There's still 150 people that can't fit on the lifeboats. So what they do is they load these people. Most of them are soldiers, most of them, but not all. And they load these people onto this raft that they made out of the parts and bits of wood of the original ship. And the plan is that they're going to tie lines, ropes to this ship and tow it. They have 60 miles of ocean to travel to get to the coast of Africa. That's spooky. 60 miles of sea. I mean, in a good boat, that's spooky. On this raft, that is going to be really treacherous. The raft is overloaded with 150 people. There are too many people on this raft. And as soon as they pull this raft away from the sandbar, it immediately starts to sink. It's too heavy. The boats that are pulling it are tugging it along, but it's just this heavy lunk of weight that wants to go below the sea with 150 people on it. So what happens? The captain, who is, let's call him a political appointee. He's a captain. He's a true captain. He hasn't sailed for years, but he is a loyalist to the French king. So he's given the command of this ship, the Medusa. He's in over his head. He is in trouble. So he makes this decision to cut the ropes away from the raft, leaving 150 people stranded in the middle of the sea, miles and miles from shore. And then these lifeboats leave them. Oh. So you can imagine the fear that would be in the hearts of these people, this 150 people on this rickety raft. All of this is true. Everything that I'm telling you happened. So on the second, so the lifeboats leave, and these mostly soldiers are adrift on the sea, and it is pitch black night. There are sharks in the water, and when the waves would move, the timbers would sort of open and close, and people would fall through the timbers, and their legs would snap as the timbers move back and forth. It was dire. These people figure, we're going to die. So there's a mutiny. These soldiers, these armed men, begin to fight. This is night 2. And they see the serious situation that they're in, and they know that the raft is overloaded and they don't have enough supplies. And so they begin to fight. And in the second night, almost half of them are killed and thrown into the sea in the mutiny. Man. So, and these are people that know each other. These are, soldiers. I'm sure they were garrisoned together, and they are fighting to the death on this raft lost at sea. Days go by. These people are stranded with no food. They have some wine, some barrels of wine. They lost the water. They threw the barrels of water away to try to lighten the ship's load, because water, was sinking it. So they have some wine, and they're eating the leather of their belts. They're starving. Their days out on the sea. It gets worse. There are people who are voluntarily stepping off the raft into the ocean to commit suicide. They are in such desperate cases. Eventually, the stronger members of the we'll call them crew, stronger members start to take the weaker people and throw them off into the sea. They're murdering them. It gets worse. After days and days on the sea, they resort to cannibalism. They begin to eat the other crew members. This is all true. It really happened. After 13 days on the sea, the Medusa is rescued by one of the other boats in their group after 13 days. And what you're seeing here in this instance is the members of the crew looking into the distance and seeing desperately, hoping this ship will spot them on the vast ocean and come rescue them. Man, that's serious. And you can now, when you look at this painting, you can start to really appreciate what's happening here. Knowing this history, you look at it and you're thinking, wow. And now you begin to understand, you know that this old man over here, he's clutching the body of his son. He's given up hope. These people over here are weak and desperate, but they're still clinging to some desire that perhaps they'll be rescued after days and days on the open, cold ocean. They are rescued when there are 13 survivors, 15 survivors. And within a few days, 5 of those survivors die. So they were down to a total of, just a few of the 150 that were initially on this raft. We're down to just a few. This story, as you can imagine, is sensational. When word of this gets back to France, people are incensed. They're furious that this happened. And what happens is they begin to blame the king for appointing this, we're not going to say incompetent, but we're not going to say, definitely an incompetent captain who cut these 150 people loose on the open water. So this event becomes very political. Then steps in Géricault. So Géricault is a young man. He paints this when he's just a young man, age 27 years old. And, 27 years old, you're still full of fire and strong opinions. So Géricault decides that this is going to be his masterpiece. He's a talented painter, but he's not a well-known or recognized painter. He's a young man. He mostly is known for painting horses. He loves horses. He loves to ride. He's fascinated with, the things that dudes are fascinated with at his 27 years of age. But he decides that what he's going to do is he's going to paint this event, the Raft of the Medusa, and this is going to be his masterpiece, and he's going to submit it to the Salon the following year. So he sets about the business of going about painting this humongous 24 feet wide by 16 foot tall painting. Now, we could go into a little bit further information about Géricault. Géricault he's a passionate young man. He's just getting out of this serious relationship, and he decides to dedicate himself no longer to being a handsome man about town. He shaves his head. He sequesters himself alone or with just a few friends in his studio, and he decides that he is going to work, night and day on this painting. So in the process of getting ready. It's so interesting. It's so interesting. So in the process of making this masterpiece, he does numerous sketches. He interviews this dude right here in the painting. He actually talks to the person who was on that painting and gets the story. He goes to the sea and he watches storms and he watches, he's standing out in the rain, watching the sea and the sky and experiencing it. He goes to hospital. There's a hospital that nearby where he's painting, and he goes and he looks at people who've drowned, and he looks at the effect of the water and the nature upon the bodies. He gets severed limbs, arms and legs and heads, and brings them to his studio and paints them. And he leaves them there, these limbs, these grisly body parts, and he looks at the effect of time on these human remains in an effort to paint the suffering that these figures must have endured on this 13 days on the ocean. He builds a small maquette of this raft, a scale model of the raft, so he can study it from all different sides, and he can make the best choices about his composition. He invests himself wholeheartedly into this painting for a year, painting this ginormous canvas that he wants to be his masterpiece, the piece that when people look at it, they will say, that is a work by Géricault. That's amazing. How did he even do that? I can't imagine it. He studies other artworks. He studies the work of Rubens, and he studies the work of the neoclassicists, and he studies he gives himself a grounding in other artists' work that will be influential to him in his work. He looks at the work of Goya. He looks at the work of other painters who deal in grisly subject matter, things that are unpleasant, startling, striking. He incorporates his knowledge of things like the work of Dante. And so this character here is thought to be Ugolino, who's from Dante's Inferno, the Divine Comedy, I'm sorry. And this figure, it was a cannibal in Dante's Inferno. So the amount of intellectual and physical energy that Géricault invested in this painting was really incredible, really incredible. So not only is the story itself incredible, but the feat, the actual endeavor to paint this is incredible. And then it gets even more interesting. So Géricault submits this work to the Salon for it to be seen and judged by the people of France. Well, you can imagine this event was fresh in the mind of the French people. It's not like this is a history. This is a current event. It just happened a few years prior. So even though Géricault did not name it the Raft of the Medusa, he just called it the scene of a shipwreck. Everybody knew exactly what it was and what they were talking about. So the judges it was sensational. When people saw it, they were just astounded, not just because it's huge, but because of the political sentiment and the tragedy that's built into this story. People it was scandalous, and it was talked about, and it was the star of the show at the Salon that year. Well, if you're going to get, when the political things are put upon it, and this is the year 2020, so what I'm talking about when I say everything is political now. That's the way this became. Everything was politicized. So this work it's seen through that political lens. It's seen through an anti-monarchy lens. Even the fact that this figure here, this top figure, is an African figure. And remember, this boat was on its way to Africa to set up a colony, a French colony. Géricault was an abolitionist. So this is the year is 1818, and of course they're aware of slavery in the New World in America. And Géricault is an abolitionist. He doesn't believe in slavery, and there's the French colonies in Africa. So now the fact that they have this African figure atop this pyramid becomes political. Everything about this painting it talks about corruption and classicism and cutting away, these wealthy nobles that cut the ropes from these the average Joe there on it causes a humongous stir at the salon, so much so that it becomes it's too hot button. So what Géricault wants to happen is he wants the nation of France to purchase this painting from him into the national collection. And so it would hang there in the Louvre as a national treasure. That's what Géricault wants to happen. And that's what should have happened, because it is the national treasure, and it really did steal the show at the Salon. But instead, it was given a gold medal of merit, but it was cast away as to not be part of the permanent collection, which, for a young 28-year-old Géricault was just heartbreaking. He was very, very upset. And after spending, really a year of his life and all of his artistic energy in this painting, it was very upsetting for him. He kind of, I'm not going to say he lapsed into a depression, but he was, it was an unhappy time in his life. Now, the good news is that it was very shortly thereafter sent to England for the English to view. Now, I don't know if you know your history, but there's not much that the English hate more than the French. So when it got to England, it was a star. People loved it. Now, I tried to do some math. I don't know if this is right or not. I tried to check my sources, but through sales of people wanting to see the painting and buying prints of the painting, my estimation is that it made somewhere in the neighborhood of about $400,000 in England. So Géricault was a star. It made a fortune for him. Again, check my numbers. I don't know if that's exactly correct, but a lot of money when people saw this. There were prints of it that were sent to America, so it was shown in America as well at the time. So Géricault really did achieve his goal of becoming a master painter. This painting becomes his masterpiece. Unfortunately, Géricault is not in the best of health, and he dies just a few years later at the age of 32 after a horse riding accident, and just poor health in general. So he never got to see that this painting, after his death, was indeed purchased by the nation of France and put into the permanent collection at the Louvre, where it hangs to this day in all of its majesty. It's really an impressive work of art. And the reason I tell you all that story and go, I don't know how long it's been, is because I want you to know that critiquing a work of art is, there's two aspects of it. There is your personal reaction when you see or hear or experience a piece of music or, artwork, dance, sculpture, architecture. Your reaction is your reaction, and it's valid. There's no wrong answer for how you feel about a piece of artwork. There's no wrong answer. Your opinion is just as good as my opinion. My opinion is just as good as any highfalutin, artsy fartsy professor of art history. My opinion is just as good as theirs when I look at this work and experience it. But there is that artsy fartsy element to it, which is the in the study of art. And now that you know, in that you intellectually have all this information about this piece, your opinion of it is probably changed. You understand it and appreciate it in a different way and at a different level than when I first presented it to you at the beginning of this lecture. So I invite you then to become consumers of art, to inform yourself about the meaning and message of these works, the history that created them, and the people, the personalities who invested themselves, their energy, their life, their everything into these works. This painting is it's the life's achievement of this real person, Theodore Géricault. He had other works that are influential and important, but this is one of the earliest of the French Romantic painters. Other artists who come along after him look to this work as a changer. This is one of the things that starts to flip that epoch. And if you remember, we talked about epochs earlier. This ushers in a new paradigm of what art means. It really is a masterpiece that changes the way that people see the world and see art and see painting and what is art. In this painting, you see, so I could go long on this thing. If you look, these figures, I told you that Géricault painted severed heads and severed limbs, and so, but if you look at these people, they're very heroic and muscular. These figures are not wasted away, and they're not even the corpses that are on the ship. They're muscular, robust figures. So when you look at, so that's a decision that Géricault made on purpose. He chose to make these figures heroic, but these aren't heroes. These are real people, and these are real people who did horrible things. It's man at the mercy of nature, and man without heroism, and man against his darker nature. It's really amazing. So, people, I hope that you stuck with me this whole time. I know I go a little bit long when I get excited about this stuff, but it really is amazing work. It really is. So learning the history, learning the context, investing yourself of this in this information is really good. And I'll just editorialize one final thing. You have the sum total of all human knowledge in your pocket right now. Everything that I just told you is accessible to you on the internet machine. There are numerous videos and websites and articles and things written about this work and the work of Géricault. These are three-dimensional renders done by a guy, I couldn't find his real name, a guy named Komodo Dragon, from a ZBrush site. But what he did is he took that painting and made a three-dimensional render of it. So when you look at it, you can see different three-dimensional views of what Géricault painted here. And there's his contact stuff down there in the bottom. I wish I knew who this guy really was, because it's just amazing what he's done with this computer render, and by making this painting into a computer render. Really impressive. So this artwork still inspires other artists to this day. It's just amazing. So, okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. I thank you very much for sticking with me and watching this. And I know I went a little bit long, but there you go. All right. And I'll just click this thing, stop.